Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to our March 7, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Call the meeting to order. We got a quorum tonight. Approval of minutes for January 24, 2018 and February 7, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Old business. Annexation of Plan of Service annexation petition for approximately 17.96 acres located along Twin Oak Drive. Mitchell Bowman, applicant. Donald?
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Chairman. Back on November 1st of last year, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for a proposed annexation and plan of services for 17.96 acres located along the east side of Twin Oak Drive, north of Halls Hill Pike. Planning staff asked at that time that the Planning Commission defer taking action on that request pending resolution of two outstanding issues. The first was lack of sewer service to the site, and the second was inadequate measures for fire protection on the site. With regard to the sewer service, we asked the applicant to obtain permission from property owners on the west side of Twin Oak Drive to allow an extension of an existing sewer line to the property. The applicant has indicated that verbal permission has been granted. Planning staff is okay with going ahead and having a vote this evening and moving this request forward to the City Council. However, signed easement documents must be submitted and recorded prior to any final action by the City Council. With regard to fire protection, the Fire Marshal, in consultation with Consolidated Utility District, has indicated that any development on this site must include a new fire hydrant on the site, and that hydrant would have to be installed prior to any building permit being issued. With that, again, staff is comfortable taking this on to the City Council. No public hearing will be necessary for this item. The Planning Commission should formulate a recommendation to the Council. Mark Lee is here. He's with SEC and he's representing the applicant and can answer any questions that you may have. Staff can also answer any questions. Thank you.
Donald, do we need to do these separately, or can we do them at the same time?
I think the annexation plan of services is one combined vote, right? Yeah. Sure. The rezoning will be a separate matter.
All right. Does the commission have any questions? If not, could I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no questions, then and if the items that we needed have all been resolved, then I would make a motion that we would approve this annexation and plan of services and annexation petition.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Zoning application for approximately 17.96 acres located along Twin Oak Drive to be zoned RS6 simultaneously with annexation, Rutherford County Habitat for Humanity applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This rezoning request relates to the very last item that we looked at. So you did hold a public hearing on November 1st of last year for this property. The applicant, Rutherford County Habitat for Humanity, has requested that the property be rezoned RS6 concurrent with annexation. That's one of our newer zoning districts that would allow 6 single-family dwelling units per acre. We don't have anything new to add since the last time that this item appeared before the Commission. As mentioned in the overview of the annexation request, the applicant has satisfied staff's concerns regarding sewer easements and fire protection, and those were the items that we asked you to defer this over back in November. No public hearing would be necessary. Staff requests that the Planning Commission formulate a recommendation to the City Council, and again, Mr. Lee is here as staff can answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Donald. Commission?
If no questions, I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, so we have 5 public hearings for tonight. Item E from our agenda has been removed. Before we open up our public hearing, if you're speaking for an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you're speaking for a group, you have 5 minutes. And please direct all your questions to the Commission. Zoning application for approximately 1.6 acres to be rezoned for RS15, GDO 4 to MU, GDO to 3, 19 Investment MCP LLC developer. Margaret Ann?
Thank you, sir. Our first public hearing this evening is for you to consider a zoning application for property that's it's just 1.6 acres, and it's located along Medical Center Parkway. And on the map before you, it's the property that has the horizontal pattern on it and outlined in black, the yellow area identified as area. You can see the property is currently zoned RS15. All those yellow parcels are zoned RS15, and that stands for Single Family Residential District. It is adjacent to property that is zoned mixed use. This property is also located within the Gateway Design Overlay District, GDO4. The application is for you to rezone this property from single family to mixed use district. And this is city-owned property, and the applicants for this rezoning requests have a contract to purchase this property from the city, and as part of that contract is, of course, that they have the zoning changed to allow mixed-use development. Their proposal is to add offices to this property. They've just had some preliminary sketches, of course, nothing that's been reviewed by you yet because the zoning doesn't permit it, but they're able to demonstrate that they can fit offices and parking here. Part of the contract with the city is that they change the zoning overlay from GDO4 to GDO3 to be consistent with other city-owned property. The other city-owned properties are zoned GDO3. Just across from this property is the city's fire station, the new fire station 4 that's under construction, and the fountains is just to the west of the property. We do have a representative of the application in our audience if you have any questions regarding this application. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing. I did want to mention that the comprehensive plan does identify this as a mixed-use area, and it's also identified as the West College Street Mixed-Use Redevelopment Program, which does recommend redevelopment of this property that, as it is now, it's not its greatest potential, and that it be redeveloped with mixed-use, high-end, either residential or commercial retail uses. So this would be consistent with our master plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff? If not, let's open up our public hearing. Anyone want to speak, please come forward.
I'm Steve Moore. I own the property at 1211 Warren Street. I just have one question. What's the difference between GDO4 and GDO3?
Thank you, Mr. Moore. We'll answer that at the end. Anyone else? So we'll close the public hearing. Staff?
Sure, there's not really a whole lot of difference between GDO3 and GDO4. The uses permitted are all the same. Primarily, the biggest difference is that GDO3 is only for properties that were owned by the city and sold to be developed or are currently owned by the city. So the types of uses are the same. It's just the height differences on the buildings that are different. What would be permitted here, an office, the maximum height is the same in both GDOs 3 and 4. So there's no difference in the type of use. It would only be different if it were a hotel, and this is not a hotel.
So you're saying height difference is the only difference in the 3 and the 4? And both GDO3 and GDO4 were for city-owned properties?
GDO3 is for city-owned properties.
GDO3.
And that's why we want to change it from 4 to 3.
Okay.
We do have private restrictive covenants on this property and other city-owned properties that require them to go through an additional review process with a group we call the DRC. So that's in addition to Planning Commission. So how it would look is when some plans were to be submitted, they would have to go to that private DRC, then to Planning Commission for an initial design review, then Planning Commission for final design review, then DRC for final design review. So in the city of Murfreesboro, this is the most stringent design standards that we have in all of the city, and the most steps involved with getting any kind of approval.
So it's definitely more restrictive than it was.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? If not, do I get a motion?
There are no questions. I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to any and all staff comments.
I'll second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. Zoning application for approximately 130 acres located along Fortress Boulevard to amend to PUD, Vickery Station PUD, Swanson Development applicant.
Thank you. This next public hearing is for an amendment to an existing zone, that's PUD, Planned Unit District, for properties owned by Swanson Development. The Victory Station PUD, which is what this one is called, is located both on the north and south side of Franklin Road along Fortress Boulevard and Swanholm Drive. And you can see the property shaded in blue on the map before you. The area that's blue with a hatch pattern on it is the portion of the PUD which they're requesting changing some of the proposed uses. This project was originally approved in 2000, so it's been about 18 years since we've approved it. And in that original approval, there was a chart with a list of uses permitted. And the applicants are coming before you tonight with a request to add to the uses that were permitted. I hope you've had an opportunity to go through my staff comments. I did divide the uses that they're requesting to be added into 3 categories. One would be the group or the list of uses that were not currently allowed in the PUD, but they're proposing to add. And I divided that into 2 groups, because there are some uses that they're proposing to add that did not exist in the year 2000, and those would be specialty limited restaurants or specialty restaurants, community shopping centers, and neighborhood shopping centers. Those just didn't exist in the year 2000, and that's why they weren't there. But there's also a list of other uses which they're proposing to add. And then the third category are some uses that are allowed in some of the out parcels, but not others. And so now they're wanting to expand the number of out parcels that would allow those uses. In my staff comments, I did identify some of the proposed uses that gave just staff concern. I know in times past when uses and plan developments are being proposed, both Planning Commission and City Council ask staff if there are any that we see any conflicts with. And some of those did concern us either with how the development type looks once it's developed or the compatibility of uses. And those uses that concerned us, I did in bold and italics so that you could recognize the differences. The applicant and applicant's representative did approach staff and have volunteered to make some changes to the list of uses permitted in response to our concerns. We did meet with them and explain why some of those uses concern us. In particular, multifamily. They were proposing to add multifamily to some of the parcels, and we were concerned that this application would allow those by right, considering the changes that we've been asked to make by Planning Commission and City Council regarding multifamily. Another example is drive-in theaters and wrecker services. The land use type just doesn't seem compatible. So what I've got, and I printed it on paper that was too big, but that I'd already printed it. So
We kind of like that.
I'm thinking of Councilman Young. Whenever I did this, he always appreciated it.
Absolutely.
So rather than reprinting it, that's what this giant paper is. Mr. Matt Taylor emailed this to staff today, and also included on the 3rd page and beyond is the amended list of uses that they're proposing to take out. So a little bit different than what's in your staff comments. I'm going to ask Mr. Taylor to come to the lectern and actually go through their requests. Mr. Joe Swanson's here, of course, as well. And these are uses that they're proposing to make modifications to. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to help you answer them. I did also include an illustration of the out parcels in the packet, and it should be on the screen for you to reference when you're looking at the uses and what out parcels they would be permitted in. I know it can get a bit complicated, so I'm glad to help. Mr. Taylor, would you mind providing some additional information?
Always. As Ms. Green said, we have made this request. We feel like the request that we have proposed is to reflect the changes in the commercial development environment since the original vision of this development 18-some years ago. I believe that you'll find in the requested uses and the amended packet that they are more service-oriented in nature versus several of the previous plans relied on large big boxes, which we don't believe are very realistic anymore. And at the same time being sensitive to the neighbors and the original vision of the project as a whole. So going over the letter that I sent to Margaret Ann, I'll go through that. From the first list were uses that were not originally allowed that we had proposed, and we have since said we'll just remove those again. They will still not be allowed. Those would be 3-family dwellings, 4-family dwellings, multifamily, drive-in theater, a parking garage as a principal use, a warehouse as a principal use. Those would be allowed as secondary or accessory uses if a larger primary use needed those. The gas, liquefied petroleum in bottles in bulk, motor vehicle sales of automobiles, motor vehicle sales other than automobiles, the wrecker service, and the package service we've removed from our requests. Next, we had taken some uses from other parcels, proposed them on new parcels. After talking with staff and understanding their concern, we are simply saying we want to leave those on the original parcels, such as recreation field, commercial outdoor amusements, including motorized, greenhouse or nurseries, lawn, tree, and garden service. And then finally, we also identified some things where the actual use itself was not necessarily objectionable, but some of the secondary things that go on with that use in certain instances may be. So we've added under vehicle sales non-motorized, we've said that would be indoor sales only, nothing outdoors. We also said that we wanted to add retail uses other than enumerated to parcels 01 and 02, which are 2 out parcels along Highway 96. Then under motor vehicle service, we said that would not include businesses doing body work, no outdoor storage, and then if they have any bay doors, those will not face public streets. And then as far as a pawn shop, we said no standalone stores. If we have a pawn shop, it would be in a commercial center or larger commercial grouping of buildings. Garden and lawn supplies, we said no outdoor storage there. And then single family attached, I think we'd originally proposed that as multifamily. We asked for that to be added to parcel K. So the full extent of the list, we tried to make that as simple as possible. We added in red as an N the new, all the new uses we want on each, have requested on each parcel. I'd be happy to go through those, but it's quite lengthy, so I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about any particular use or parcel.
Is it possible to do a list of those uses?
I will say I think that list will largely match or will match what was in the agenda packet, except for the changes that are outlined in this letter that I just went over.
So Matthew, when you say motor vehicle service, are you talking like mechanic?
Be a mechanic or maybe a tire change in place, something along those lines. I think that in our meeting we referenced, not to call out a certain business, but Christian Brothers along Memorial Boulevard, how their building is oriented long ways so that the bays don't face the street. That's what we were after there. A good example of a good example.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Taylor?
So if you were looking at this request today versus 20 years ago, are there any requests that wouldn't be in standard today that you're asking for now?
I don't.
Are you sure you understand?
Yeah,
so
I'm not
if
sure
you made the request 20 years ago and these things weren't in the request 20 years ago.
Right.
Right. And if you made that same request today, based on our standards, would these be permitted today?
I think that that would be a judgment call by the Planning Commission City Council. I will say that when this was originally done, plan developments were newer to the city than they are now.
Right.
And I think somebody said there were 5 that were our new standards done at that time. This was rather large, of course, and quite ambitious. And through time, I think we've seen development evolve and change. And I mean, I don't think there's anything offensive about the idea of asking for additional uses. I want to make sure that they're okay with what they're asking for. As a matter of fact, they came in asking just for 1 additional use, and we said, rather than you keep coming back, why don't you look at our uses and see if there are any others that you wanted to add, so that you wouldn't keep coming back. I think they got very ambitious with the uses they wanted to add, so when I got that list, staff suggested they pared it back. But I don't think there's anything offensive about the idea of adding the uses so long as you think they're appropriate land use type and appropriate compatibility.
Matt, on this list, it's got boat rental, sales, or repair is the same. Yeah, you talked about no outdoor storage, bay doors won't face public streets. I mean, is that even possible? Well, I mean, did it not have boats outside?
I think boats, and I gave my list away, so you have to excuse me. Which parcels did we request those to be added on?
J, K, Q, and R.
So I think J, K, Q, and R, we felt like were internal to the development, I think, as we went through those, rather than right out on Highway 96. Is why we left that request in, Mr. Halliburton. Never shot for a boat, so I'm not sure where they keep those.
Well, I just don't know how that would be I've never seen a boat place that does rental, sales, or repair and you've answered my question, have the ability to have them all inside.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is, with respects to the J, K, Q, and R, you're not saying that they are going to be inside. You're asking them to be able to be outside.
Yes, that's correct. We've not put any additional restrictions on that.
Correct.
Any more questions for Mr. Taylor before we open up our public hearing? Or staff?
Well, we could spend an hour looking at these.
Yes. So, say for instance, Mr. Green, if we approve that based on what Ken talked about with the boats, can the applicant come back before us or come to staff and say, hey, we got somebody with a boat usage? Could we make sure that it fits what we're looking for?
So you can recommend that the council approve this with amendments that they are requested, but also say, take boat sales out, and if it comes up in the future, come back to us. Okay. Or you can say, I want the same restrictions on boat sales that you have on automotive sales. Okay. Or you can say, leave it as it is.
Okay, thank you.
We're fine putting the same restriction. If that's important to the commission, then we're fine putting the same restriction on that particular use for the boat sales.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. If there's no more questions, let's open up our public hearing. Anyone want to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Please state your name and address.
Yes, Robert Masick, 3739 Franklin Road, and we're along the eastern side of the property, and I'd like to just leave it as it is. I'm not sure adding much to it. It seems like it's really confusing the issue, and it seems like what they have now is good, and I guess my question is why are we adding to it and not taking anything away? I'm next to the Sierra zoning there, S, and I don't think multiple family would be appropriate, or the assisted care living, or the offices, because that's right along Puckett Creek, and that's a flood zone anyway, and that would probably cause more flooding on my property. I'm okay with it being a campground, that's fine, and I think that there are so many changes here, and it's so confusing that you should probably defer it a little bit longer so that we can all look at it a little bit more. I mean, I had 2 days to try to figure all this stuff out, and it seems like with your questions that maybe they need a little more time to discuss it and look at it. There are quite a few changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Chris Bohan. I live at 3737 Franklin Road, right next door to Bob. I have the similar concerns on the flooding issues. If that has to be built up, the flood from Puckett Creek will eventually come into our properties. The other thing that I'm worried about is the community compatibility. What is it going to look like? Nobody knows. You can make it look like something, but it could take away from the community. That's my concern there. The last thing is, there was a lot of staff changes that were made that were mentioned earlier, a lot of changes that were made up here that we don't know about, that we haven't had a chance to review ourselves. And I think it's only fair that we defer this with all these changes that are being taken place and the questions that you have. Just defer this so that the neighborhood can digest what's happening so we can be on board or be against either way. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, close the public hearing. Argadan, I think he mentioned about flooding.
Yeah, there is, of course, Puckett Creek that runs adjacent to this property. The city does have regulations regarding flooding and management of stormwater, which is rainwater, and how it's managed. Essentially, any development that happens in the city cannot just put the water on its neighbor. They have to be able to continue to receive the water they received before, retain it at a rate which it had pre-development, and then slowly release it. And there are different forms that we use to regulate that. Sometimes you see detention ponds, sometimes you see permeable pavers where the water is stored beneath the surface. But we certainly require management of any floodwaters or rainwaters, and so the development itself should not cause any additional water to be put on its neighbor, regardless of what it is, because those regulations apply to all commercial development.
And I think the other question was about building and design.
Sure. This is a part of the Victory Station PUD planned unit district, and there are some design standards, some aesthetics that were put in place that will apply to all development here. The development is required to go through the Architectural Review Committee, which is a private group for this development. And then, of course, the Planning Commission will review any future proposed developments. You'll review the material types, the colors, the designs, and the aesthetics of the building. And those were established when this was originally adopted by the city in 2000. And they're recorded as restrictive covenants in addition to being a part of the PUD zoning. So it's something that we certainly would look at. That the Planning Commission would have final say on.
Is there any questions from the commission?
Well, are there any of these that are, I was just wondering if there were one or two of them specifically that we needed to go ahead and address, we could look at those, and if maybe we could just defer it to the next meeting so that we just had a little more time to look at each of these. I don't see anything, I've been through the full list now, that just jumps out at me that I would have an issue with or a question about, but I understand where everybody's coming from, that it's a lot to look at and a lot to take in, and I know we've had it for a couple of weeks, but a lot of times until we not a couple of weeks, a couple of days, but until we hear it all and hear you all tell us about it, it's hard to really comprehend what we're trying to do. So, and if the
Or even so, Ms. Jones, is there anything that staff sees fit to take out?
There were certainly a lot of things, and I think that they took them out, and then with the ones that we asked for them to take out that they have decided to leave in, one of the things we said take out was pawn shop, and their solution to you was to add restrictions that they couldn't be standalone stores, that they must be in a commercial center or other large grouping or building. So that was one thing that we suggested. And then we suggested motor vehicle service be taken out, but that includes body service. So if you think the way that one might look, Christian Brothers looks good, but then there's some other uses. We might have a partially dismantled vehicle or cars that need a repair in the parking lot. So their solution is to say no body work, no outdoor storage, and that the bay doors won't face the streets, and using the National Tire and Battery and Firestone in the gateway as examples of that they're looking to allow here. The retail uses other than enumerated should have been in here before. And then the vehicle sales, we were concerned about, there is a vehicle sales node just to the north where we have several very large automobile sales, GM, Toyota,
Yep.
Mazda. And so we thought that that really didn't need to expand southward. So they took those vehicle sales out, and they're proposing to keep non-motorized in, and non-motorized vehicle sales is like a bicycle shop. So we felt comfortable with that. And then they have also added the restriction that those would be indoor sales only, so you wouldn't have bikes just kind of stacked outside. So that was their solution to some of the items that we asked to be taken out. But we had quite a few of them.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you have pawn shop, motor vehicle service, and vehicle sales. Those are the three?
They've taken vehicle sales out, and they've left just the
Just
bicycle
two.
ones. Yeah, the motor vehicle service, the pawn shop, the garden and lawn supplies, which for me, the thing that concerned me was the outdoor mulch bins, the outdoor accessory type uses. So they're saying no outdoor storage. So the garden and lawn supplies, as far as I'm concerned, has satisfied my concerns. So I would just want to know, pawn shop and motor vehicle service, does that satisfy you? It seems to, the things that I told them that concerned me about them, they've added some standards to address that. So I wonder if Planning Commission has some additional concern or agrees with the standards.
Ma'am, the public hearing is closed. Thank you.
and
Go ahead, Ms. Jones.
would the things that they've where they put the restrictions on those certain, are those things that you feel like if we're reviewing it, is that something we're going to be able to control, or is that only going to be controlled by codes or something? Can we affect that by anything we would approve or not?
So it would become a part of the plan development, and so it would become the zoning for the property. So the way that it can be controlled is the developer should control it first of all, but if they don't,
Right.
then any zoning violation that we have in the city, it would follow the same method, which is, and Mr. Whitaker might want to talk about how we handle our zoning violations. But it would be like all of our
I was just thinking more along the lines of, so if the vehicle sales, if we didn't approve a certain type of layout that they brought in because maybe it had room for everything to be displayed outside and we're only allowing it inside, is that something, do they all look like things that we're going to be able to, at the time we would approve something for that particular site, then they wouldn't be able to do that anyway with
mean the
the
site
building and, the parking or what parking is not available or, I'm just thinking if there's a way for us to, because if if it's going to get pushed all the way to the point where the person that then builds the business and, they're the ones that are going to, the developers are going to do what they're supposed to do, I know, and they all do. And we're going to try to do what we're supposed to do. It's the people that then buy the business and run the business that will then
Misuse.
they'll misuse it, and you'll be left trying to regulate that from a code standpoint.
Actually, it wouldn't be regulated from code standpoint. It'd be regulated from the zoning side, not necessarily Mr. Holtz, who happens to be in the crowd tonight.
So
But it would be a zoning violation of their plan
planning
development.
staff gets to go.
And we
Control.
send out, unfortunately, we do send out several letters during the year where people don't follow our zoning ordinance, and we send them a nice letter to begin with and ask them to come into compliance, and if they don't after a period of time, then we'll follow that up with a citation to our city court, at which time then we'll have a hearing, and it's up to the judge to, they can be fined up to $50 a day for every day they're in violation. So it would be enforceable because it would be a violation of the zoning ordinance. So Mr. Holtz would actually get out of this.
So, so basically what I'm hearing is, can we have the applicant, could you please come to the podium, please?
Yes, sir.
So basically what staff is saying is pawn shop, motor vehicle services, and vehicle sales. And that, we don't want that, but you want that in,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Now, please understand that there are design guidelines that were set up 18 years ago. Of course, this is kind of like one of my children. I've had it for 18 years, and I'm ready to move him on, so to speak. And there have been many opportunities that I have passed on because it doesn't fit the characteristics of the development that we're trying to do. Last year, I think we did 3 or 4 amendments to this PUD. So at the request of staff, we came forward with these revisions. With the design guidelines, I feel like, and the staff at the city and the Planning Commission, we can control the look and the feel of this development. I think what we've established thus far is in keeping with the original that was established 18 years ago.
Okay. Thank you.
So for example, motor vehicle service, and then they've added in that the bay doors can't face the public road. Obviously, when that comes before us, that's going to be an easy fix. So if we're saying we would allow motor vehicle service as long as the bay doors don't face the public road, then are we okay with that in those zones? So the excluding body work, I don't know how to address, and the no outdoor storage, we should be able to address and keep that, pawn shop only in those certain, in the commercial center or larger, not the standalone building. Again, we should be able to, we wouldn't be approving that out in a standalone. Of course, it might come back to us then, but still, y'all wouldn't allow it. Wouldn't come to us. Y'all get to do that.
Hopefully, we would catch these items before they come forward.
I got one more question on uses, just so I have it in my mind, because I'm mainly, and maybe this is not the right way to look at it, but I'm looking at external property, so the uses in O and O2, and one of them is amusements, commercial, outdoor, excluding, and I'm assuming that means excluding motorized vehicles.
That's right. It means excluding motorized. An example would be
Like a
a
putt-putt.
putt-putt
Yeah.
course.
Okay.
An example of motorized would be a go-kart
Yeah.
course.
Okay. mean, I'll make a comment. I've looked at this, and granted, there's a lot of additions and subtractions and stuff like that, but based upon what I think, based upon design controls, based upon the fact that we're going to see this as it goes along, I think that, and then with their revisions with respects to certain uses, I'm okay with moving forward. With that, I'll make a motion that are we at that point?
Let's make sure nobody else has any more comments. Any more comments before we make a motion?
No, I agree with Mr. Halliburton's comments.
I'm sure the applicant knows this is a great piece of property, great area, and he's built a lot of things in this area and wants to do the right thing, and I'm sure he's going to do the right thing.
So when I look at it, though, if I look at it right, the only new is, for instance, a brewery. Every other one could have had these same things on other properties or other plots. So you're not really adding a lot of new applications.
That's true.
Whatever they were putting on there, they could have put it on any other property.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments, including the comment about the boat deal.
All right. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? So moved. Motion passes.
May I add that this is your recommendation and it will go to City Council, so there will be another public hearing and another opportunity to review this, and that this isn't the final
That's true.
time that this is going to be looked at. So some folks wanted some more time, and there'll be at least 6 weeks, I think, between now and then.
Before it goes to City Council.
Before it goes to City Council.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Item C, Annex Plan of Services, Annex Petition for approximately 147.3 acres located along Bradyville Pike and Ville's Road. Kenneth S. Carter, applicant. Mr. Brumley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is an annexation petition and plan of services for property located along the north side of Bradyville Pike and the south side of Ville's Road. I will mention, just for clarification purposes, there are 2 items on the agenda tonight that are pertaining to this property. There's the annexation, which is the item that we're discussing right now, which is purely the annexation and the plan of services for the property. In other words, bringing the property into the city's jurisdiction. The next item after this one will be the zoning of the property and the proposed development, just as a point of clarification. The impetus for this request was the 134 acres. That's the large parcel shaded in blue on the map before you. By itself, it's disconnected from the existing city limits. So you can see that the right-of-way of Ville's Road adjacent to the subject property has been included, as well as some right-of-way on Bradyville Pike. All in all, about 2,400 linear feet of Bradyville Pike south of the subject property, approximately 2,000 linear feet of Bradyville Pike right-of-way at its intersection with Ville's Road, and approximately 6,700 linear feet of Ville's Road north of the subject property, going all the way back to its intersection with Bradyville Pike. And we're proposing to pare down the right-of-way of Ville's Road that's included, and I'll go over that in just a moment. But the area that we advertised in for our public hearing is all of the right-of-way of Ville's Road to the eastern boundary of the subject property. Also included in the annexation petition, or as a separate petition, was if you'll look north of the intersection of Ville's Road and Bradyville Pike, north of Foxworth Court, you can see a faint 10-foot strip in there above the street, the odd street name TBD. That 10-foot strip was left out of the tract with the TBD on it in order to keep those 3 parcels close to the intersection with Rutherford Boulevard from being encircled by the city limits. Since then, our legal department has advised us that after an analysis of the latest state law, that islands of counties surrounded by the city limits are not prohibited. And so rather than have a 10-foot strip of the Brady Estates subdivision, which is currently under development just north of the Fox Creek subdivision, have a 10-foot strip of that in the county's jurisdiction, that it made sense to go ahead and include that 10-foot strip in this annexation petition as well. So the owner of the owner and developer of Brady Estates has submitted an annexation petition, and we've included that in this annexation to kind of tie up that loose end. A couple things of note with regards to this annexation petition and plan of services. Sewer is not available to the subject property. So you'll recall that last year the City Council made provisions for developments within the city limits to be developed on a step system. And so the applicants are proposing to use a step system to sewer this property. And they've actually been approved by the Murfreesboro Water Resources Board, I think that was back in December, to use a step system on this property. Another point of note is that there is an existing single-family home at 3795 Bradyville Pike that is on the subject property. And there are also some outbuildings as well. There's no fire hydrant currently along Bradyville Pike to serve that existing single-family home. So after consultation with our fire and rescue department, we would ask that any approval of this annexation be subject to either the demolition of the existing house and the outbuildings or the installation of a fire hydrant in front of the structures along Bradyville Pike at a location to be approved by the fire and rescue department. That condition has been communicated to the applicant, and they're aware that they must either meet one or two of those conditions prior to second reading at City Council if this annexation and zoning were to move forward to the City Council with a positive recommendation. One thing, I did mention that there was a reduction in the amount of right-of-way of Ville's Road that we are recommending. And you'll see in the next application, the proposed development does not have any direct access to Ville's Road. And that's primarily due to the physical constraints on the property. And so we felt that it really didn't make sense for us to go ahead and annex all of the right-of-way in front of the subject property, or on the north side of the subject property on Ville's Road, if there wasn't going to be any access from this development. That would mean that the existing homes to the north along Ville's Road and the intersection of Double Springs Road, that would remain in the unincorporated county. So if you approve this tonight, we would actually recommend that you approve the revised study area as opposed to what was advertised. And I've handed out a map to you on your desks that shows the revised study area, that area of the Ville's Road right-of-way excluded from what we are recommending. Another point of note is that there is actually an annexation along the north side of Ville's Road. That's in the orange color on this map. I put this in just for your information. Those 4 parcels that are in the orange have been recommended to the City Council for annexation. The City Council approved the annexation and the zoning of those properties on first reading. However, we've been holding the second reading at City Council as Mr. Friedson, the developer of those parcels in orange, seeks to acquire a water line easement to be able to provide water to his proposed development. So just wanted to give you a status update on that particular request right now. If he does obtain that water line easement, we would anticipate that moving forward for second reading, and that would actually be another annexation that's actually a little bit closer than the existing city limits. And I think we do expect the larger parcel, if you look at the map, the area that has the actual dialogue box that says area in process of annexation, not the orange area, but the larger tract just to the east of where it says Lincoya Drive, right here, where Ms. Green has her cursor. We've had discussions with possible developers looking at that parcel, and I think that it would be our expectation that at some point in the future, you'll probably be seeing an application for that parcel. As far as the major thoroughfare plan, I did want to mention that there are two improvements that are noted on the major thoroughfare plan. We don't have any particular time frame for these two improvements, but I think it's worthy of note. Bradyville Pike from South Rutherford Boulevard over to Mount Herman Road is on the major thoroughfare plan as a midterm improvement to be improved as a 3-lane roadway. And there is a new road, which we would call, I guess, generically the Irby Lane extension, which would be extended from, if you see Irby Lane on this map, would be extended north to John Bragg Highway and Woodbury Pike, going just to the east of the property in orange. So a couple of road improvements that are on our major thoroughfare plan. They're on the plan, but like I said, there is nothing definite on any time frame. And of course, Bradyville Pike is a state route. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding the annexation. As I mentioned, this public hearing is for the annexation only, and the zoning and the proposed development will be the next public hearing.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew before we open up the public hearing? Not. Public hearing is now open. All for or against, please come forward.
Good evening, y'all. I was trying to give somebody else an opportunity to go first.
Please state your name and address.
My name is Alan Chambers. I'm going to be addressing y'all tonight in an effort to be respectful, but yet at the same time show appreciation for allowing me to do so. So thank you. But this is an emotional issue. It affects me personally, it affects my family, but it also affects our community. And it's mainly on the primary concerns of public safety. When you consider this, I appreciate if you guys would please be accommodating not only to your consciences, but accommodating to the public. When you realize that even though we can't stop forward progress, we need to show respect to our community and to each other. This road on Bradyville, as I've talked with some of you already before, we have emergency vehicles that travel this road daily. Bradyville has no shoulders. We've had numerous accidents, not only in front of our house, but we've had cars and trucks actually hit our house. So we see all this improvement being made. I know my neighbors are concerned. I've talked with you all before about the one up on Ville's Road that's going to be put in. I believe that illustration didn't even show the development going down on Dilton Mankin also. Now, the developer and the representatives seem to be accommodating. They seem to be concerned, and we appreciate that. But when we look at this a little deeper and we start realizing that there's 210 homes going in here, there's another 200 some going down there, there's 60 over here, another projection over here, 2 to 4 cars per home, talking about 1,000 to 1,500 cars in the area on a road that has no berm, no shoulders, no improvements, no nothing. Now, if you take that consciously, you'll understand, why people are so concerned about this heavy congestion, because it can sometimes take 17 minutes for us to get out of our house. 17 minutes on Bradyville Road in the morning. So if you guys are we can't stop the progress, but if you're all going to consider these things, then why don't you just consider the fact that this is inside the urban development plan? Make the improvements while these things are going up. Do it alongside. If you got to wait for the income to start coming in, make the improvements as the people are building these residential areas. Be conscionable about the things that you're doing in the community and realize that this is not just about money. It's not just about the community. It's not just about everything in general, but it's about us personally and the safety of our public. So taking that into consideration, I mean, no disrespect whatsoever, but even when you take into consideration the political hierarchy of how all these things work, the county people where these improvements are being made can't report to you guys. We can't vote for or against city council. We can't vote for or against anything in Murfreesboro. So we need to take these things into consideration when we look at these problems and maybe start addressing some of those issues also. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sir, could you
Yes.
Please give us your address.
2897 Bradyville Pike. Sorry, I
Thank
set my
you.
3-minute timer here.
Thank you.
We're right there at that proposal of Irby Lane where that new road is going in, Ville's, all of that. So it will affect us personally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else?
My name's Ron Malone. I live at 1936 Sterling Street. Thank you to the Commission for indulging us this evening. Representatives from the site engineering consultants, they held an informational meeting over at Black Fox Elementary School back on February 26th. And they informed me and approximately about 30 or so of my neighbors and friends that of their plans to introduce this 210 single-family homes into our area. Now, I've lived on Sterling Street for approximately 24 years now. Lived here in Murfreesboro for 37 years, and while I am not opposed to progress and growth and all those things that are certainly welcome and desired here in Rutherford County and in Murfreesboro, this proposal, I'm afraid, it concerns me for one reason, and it's the reason that my neighbor just spoke. It's safety, folks. Adding 210 homes with the almost certain addition of between 400 and 600 vehicles, all of which will be entering and exiting on a narrow, absolutely no shoulder, a dangerous road. We've had quite a few accidents. It's very tough. You have a lot of folks that don't adhere to the speed limit that's located out there. And there are, like I say, numerous accidents. What's more is their proposal, if the sign, I guess if the diagram was still up, their proposal positions the entrances into this complex of 210 units, approximately 400 to 600 vehicles, maybe even more, right at the exit at Sterling Street and on Pebblebrook. Now, I live on Sterling, and like my neighbor just said, it takes a long time to get out onto Sterling Street in the morning. These cars are going to come straight at us at that particular intersection. I will need to be making a left in order to get to work every day. They will be making a right. They will have the right of way along with traffic going in both directions. It's very dangerous, and the only thing that I would ask is that before we consider doing something like this, we take that into consideration. If there are already plans to improve the road, maybe it happens as it goes along, maybe it happens before this particular development is put in place. But this is not the way that we work with our friends and neighbors in order to improve and in order to help Murfreesboro and Rutherford County continue to grow. I'm very sensitive to that. I've had the pleasure of working at MTSU and parking and transportation here for the last 20 years. Very sensitive every time we've had an opportunity to do some work on campus where we add roadways, where we add roundabouts, where we add parking garages. Safety is always number one. I don't believe safety is number one in this particular situation, and I hope that the Commission will take that under advisement as you make your decision about this particular proposal. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, if not, we're going to close up the public hearing. So, Matthew, talk about safety and Bradyville Pike Road.
And Chairman Wade, I don't know if that would be more appropriate to discuss during the zoning public hearing next regarding the proposed development.
Okay.
I think that we've got some additional information on the traffic study and staff's proposed recommendations at that time. The annexation is just for the annexation, bringing it into our jurisdiction and whether or not we can provide services.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sir, is there any questions from the Commission? If not, is there a motion?
If there's no questions, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve the annexation and plan of services and annexation petition, the revised one that was handed out tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item D, zoning application for approximately 134 acres located along Bradyville Pike to be zoned PRD, Carter's Retreat PRD, simultaneous with annexation of approximately 0. acres to be zoned RS-15, simultaneously annexation, Source Land LLC applicant. Mr. Bromley.
Thank you, Chairman Wade. The next public hearing is the companion zoning request. And I'll go ahead and just start with the 10-foot strip over there at Brady Estates that I mentioned earlier. Brady Estates is zoned RS-10, so we propose that that 10-foot strip be zoned RS-10 as well to be consistent with the existing zoning at Brady Estates. The bulk of this request in the public hearing will be the proposed Carter's Retreat PRD, which is the 134-acre parcel located along the north side of Bradyville Pike and the south side of Beals Road. Property is, as I mentioned before, primarily undeveloped with the exception of a single-family home and several outbuildings. The previous item on the agenda was for the annexation of this tract. Subject property is surrounded on all four sides by unincorporated county. To the north across Beals Road are some single-family residences along Beals Road as well as along Double Springs Road, including the Twin Springs subdivision. Directly to the west is an undeveloped tract as well as the Eastland Manor single-family residential subdivision. To the south across Bradyville Pike are the Dilton Springs and Bradyton single-family residential subdivisions. And bordering the property on its east side are several large single-family residential parcels. The proposed PRD is called Carter's Retreat, which does consist of 210 single-family residential lots. As I mentioned before, this property would be served by a step system, and there would have to be step fields on the property to accommodate that step system. The minimum lot size is proposed to be 6,500 square feet, and the development of its 134 acres would contain approximately 85 acres of open space. There are two access points proposed to Bradyville Pike, and there's one stub to the west to an undeveloped tract. Because of the environmental conditions, the physical constraints along Bradyville Pike, the applicants are proposing not to develop the north side of the property. However, they are proposing to stub into the undeveloped property to the west, which is a property that has soils that are more suited for development. And once that property develops, provided it does develop in the future, this would provide a secondary access back to Beals Road to the north. But for the time being, there are two access points proposed, and both of those are to Bradyville Pike. The minimum home size is proposed to be 1,600 square feet of living space, and exterior materials would consist of brick, stone, and fiber cement siding, with fiber cement siding being the predominant exterior material. Amenities will include a playground, pavilion, and both paved and unpaved nature trails. There will be a 30-foot wide landscape yard with berming along Bradyville Pike. As an aside, the applicant is still working with the Water Resources Department on the design of the step system and the location of the step soils. And so if this application moves forward to City Council, we would ask that the applicant continue to work with the Water Resources Department on those issues prior to City Council. Future land use map contained in the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan, which was adopted by the Planning Commission in July 2017, recommends that the property develop as suburban residential. And suburban residential calls for a density of 2 to 3.54 dwelling units per acre. And Ms. Green put up the 2035 Comprehensive Plan future land use map for us, and you can see the area that's pointed to with the word site and called out as suburban residential. The proposed density of Carter's Retreat is 1.57 dwelling units per acre, which is slightly less than the recommended density of the comprehensive plan. According to the plan, the existing zoning districts that are compatible with the suburban residential zone are RS15, RS12, and RS10. And furthermore, it indicates that this character type includes small acreages or large lot estate development, or may also be smaller lots clustered around open space. And so this would be the latter, smaller lots clustered around open space. As I mentioned, approximately 85 of the 134 acres of this tract is proposed to be left as open space. I'd like to point out that I received an email from Mr. Buddy Miller, who said he could not attend today, and I told him I would pass out his correspondence that's on your desks. If you'd like to take a moment to read that, an email from Mr. Buddy Miller dated February 28th. I'd like to read that into the record, not the entire text of it, but just read it in that it has been provided to you. A couple items that I wanted to relay to you from our transportation staff, Mr. Balachandra, our traffic engineer. There was a traffic study that was submitted to Mr. Balachandra for his review, and in a moment, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Molchan will summarize the findings of that traffic study. There are a few things of note, though, that I'd like to get on the record that Mr. Balachandra and I discussed before the meeting. The intersection of Ville Road and Bradyville Pike was not included in the traffic study, and that may merit some analysis on what impact this development will have on that intersection. Also, staff recommends that a continuous left turn lane be provided between the two proposed streets on Bradyville Pike, or the two proposed streets that would intersect with Bradyville Pike, for traffic operational reasons. In other words, one left turning vehicle into the proposed development will hold up the through traffic on Bradyville Pike. Right now, they're proposing in the pattern book a left turn lane into one of the two proposed streets that would enter the development, and staff would recommend a continuous left turn lane on Bradyville Pike for those two streets. And so if the Planning Commission recommends approval, we would ask that you make it contingent upon on that continuous left turn lane instead of just a left turn lane at one entrance. With that being said, I'd like to invite Mr. Molchan to the lectern to make a brief PowerPoint presentation on this development. I'll be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
Good evening, Chairman Wade, members of the Planning Commission, Rob Olchen, SEC. I'm here tonight on behalf of Sourceline LLC, the applicant. I'm accompanied tonight by Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC and Taz Lundy and Laws Bolden, the applicants. We're here tonight to present to you Carter's Retreat, our planned residential district. As you can see in regards to the existing aerial photo, the property is located to the south side of Ville Road, which is the orange road along the northern portion of the picture, and Bradyville Pike, which is the blue road that stretches from east to west across the southern portion of the site. To the west, the yellow line there, that's Oak Knoll Court, and to the south, you have three different streets coming from the residential components or subdivisions to the south that we'll talk about more in a little bit. As Matthew talked about, the current zoning around the development is all unincorporated portions of Rutherford County. As you can see, the portions of the city located with RS15, RS10, and planned unit developments to the east of the development. As we talked about in regards to the annexation portion, we'll be looking at the annexation of Ville's Road to a connectivity standpoint back to the city and the connectivity for zoning. As Matthew talked about in the 2035 plan, this is called for suburban residential character. This is a transitional land development type between rural and suburban land uses. So such types as Matthew talked about in regards to either large lot developments or small lot developments that are clustered around green spaces or open spaces on that. The density that's associated with the proposed land use in regards to the land use map calls for 2 units to 3.5, 4 units per acre. The proposed development with Carter's Retreat is calling for 1.57 units to the acre. That is less than the 2 units per acre minimum for the land use plan on that side. That is primarily incorporated because with this project we are utilizing the smaller lot size but incorporated into a large amount of open space. Roughly 64% of the project is open space in regards to the 134 acres. So 85 acres of this property will be left as some type of open space, whether that be usable or unusable open space. I'll give you a couple quick shots in regards to the existing conditions out there today. This is looking into the site on Bradyville Pike from Sterling Street. As you can see, mostly a lot of pasture and farmland with some trees in the backdrop, which are associated more with the rugged terrain at the back of the property along Ville's Road. Again, a view, this is looking from Sterling Street and Bradyville Pike back towards the backside of Oak Knoll as it's on the western boundary of the property. This is looking back to the east towards where the homestead is. You can see some of the outbuildings and such like that. And this is the existing home that we talked about in regards to the only residential portion that's on the property currently. Here's a couple of pictures of homes that are located in the subdivisions to the south. This is a picture of a couple of homes on Sterling Street. A couple of homes on Cool Springs Drive, which is the middle of the 3 roads that is to the south of the development. And these are a couple of homes along Oak Knoll Court, which is the small cul-de-sac subdivision to the west of our development. Plan calls for PRD zoning, 210 single-family detached homes on 134 acres, so 1.57 units to the acre. As I talked about, the mainstay, as you can see in the plan itself, is mainly the incorporation of over 85 acres, or 64% of this project being left as open space in some form or fashion. All the streets will be public streets. Will be sidewalks on both sides of all streets to make it a very walkable community, and all utilities will be underground. A little bigger image to show the comparison with regards to the residential development versus the open space character of the neighborhood. Actual lots themselves will be 6,500 square foot lots. There will be a minimum 55 foot wide at the building setbacks. Our setbacks, you can see the setback diagram here on the page. You'll be looking at 35-foot front setbacks that allow for 4 cars to be parked in front of the buildings or garages on that side. Same will be for any side entry garage units that may be developed with these homes, that any side entry garage will also be 35-foot, allowing for the 4 parking spaces in the driveway. If no side entry garage is utilized on the corner lot, the setback will be reduced by 5 foot to a 30-foot front setback. Sides will be 5 foot and the rears will be 15. The homes will be 2 stories in nature, and there will be a minimum 1,600 square foot of living space. There will be a mixture of 2 and 3 bedrooms. Each home will have a covered front porch or stoop to add some character to the front elevation. There will be 2-car front entry garages, and those front entry garages will incorporate garage windows, and the colors will complement the architecture. Building materials in regards to the homes themselves, the primary building material on this will be cementatious fiberboard on all elevations. The front will incorporate brick and stone accent elements to go along with the cementatious fiberboard. And vinyl will only be permitted in the trim soffits and fascia. As you can see some of the examples in regards to the cement fiberboard, it can either be a siding component, or you can have a board and batten or a shake style component included in those architectural characters. Here's a couple of graphic representations of what the homes could potentially look like. And you can see the different characters and qualities and the different shake style and stuff like that in some of the gables. They are stone and brick type of character along some of the foundational elements along the front. Again, garages with front entry garages with the stoops and covered porches as well. Amenities, as I spoke, the site is over 64% of it being open space. The main amenity component will be a pavilion and playground, which will be located at the back of the property itself, centralized to all the other roadways within the development. So as you come back, this becomes the central focus point for the usable open space at the back of the development back there. We're also looking at a paved trail system that comes from the actual roadway back to the pavilion and playground area, but also a looping trail system back that's a paved trail system for walking, jogging, and enjoying the outdoors out there. We're also incorporating a what I would call an unimproved or unpaved trail section. What we're planning on doing this portion where we show it running along the eastern boundary of the property through the wooded area is much more conducive for us to go ahead and run through there and blaze a little trail for outdoor nature walks and such on that side. And that will also connect back to the eastern cul-de-sac from a sidewalk standpoint and provide connectivity back to the paved nature trail system that I spoke about earlier. Furthermore, from an amenity standpoint, we're providing a front door appearance along this. We're incorporating a 30-foot wide landscape yard along the Bradyville Pike as our front door experience to kind of help blend our neighborhood into the overall fabric and character and create a little extra feel of a brand new neighborhood in the area. This will incorporate mounds, berming, that type of stuff, along with evergreen and deciduous trees, shrubs, and grasses to create a very good character feel along the front of the neighborhood. We'll also be incorporating an entrance signage at the first entrance of the intersection of Sterling there, so you can see an example of that. As we talked about in regards to access, we're looking at two main access points. The first main access point will be a new four-way intersection at Sterling Street on Bradyville Pike. The second street will be a four-way intersection at Pebblebrook Drive. As Matthew talked about, we have no direct connection back to Ville's Road. That is due to, as you can see, the large green area along the northern portion of the property is very unconducive to development. What we are going to provide is a stub to the western undeveloped property over there with the anticipation that as that property develops out, it will provide a connection back through that property back to Ville's Road. So there will be potentially a connection back to Ville's Road in the future as that land develops out. We're also, in part of our neighborhood meeting that we had a week or so ago, is a discussion in regards to construction traffic and how construction will be dealt with in regards to the entrances being off of Bradyville Pike. We kind of came to the surmising to creating a construction entrance off of Ville's Road instead of off of Bradyville Pike, where there'd be a lot less traffic congestion on that side. So as you can see in the diagram there, we've proposed a construction entrance off of Ville's Road along our eastern property line coming back into the development on that side, which would connect into our eventual phase 4 of the development as time progressed on the development. Here's a couple images. This is an image looking at Bradyville Pike from Sterling Street. So the image on the left is looking westbound. As you can see, the unshouldered roadway with the ditch section on that side. And again, looking back to the east on the other picture. This is the mid-block run. This is Cool Springs Drive, where we're not proposing any connection in regards to a four-way intersection. You can see the looking westward view there, and then on the eastern view on the right-hand side. And lastly, the connection at Pebblebrook Drive. You can see looking back to the west on the left-hand side, and the eastern view as you're looking down Bradyville Pike towards the curve as it comes back towards the straightening out portion of the development. I appreciate your time and consideration of this request, and I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions right now?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's open up our public hearing at this time. Anyone who want to speak for or against, please come forward.
Yeah, my name's Ron Malone. I live on Sterling Street. And as you can see by the diagrams that they have presented, I'm going to be very much affected by what is about to take place, I'm afraid. My concern is that we do have some severe safety issues on Sterling Street, and that this group has the opportunity to make sure that something like that does not create issues and problems, because most of the time these things don't get addressed until there is an accident that causes someone to step up and say, well, maybe we should have rethought that a little bit. I hope that is being taken into consideration at this point by the commission. I really do appreciate everything that you're doing and all the questions that everyone is asking. But I would say that when we start talking about what could be done and what might be done, if we know that the street is scheduled or the highway is scheduled for widening, that it is scheduled to be widened all the way from Rutherford Boulevard all the way out past this particular intersection. My request would be that this type of construction would be delayed until that construction is at least underway or has been scheduled. The second thing that I would ask, if that is not an option, is whether or not this group might have the option of rectifying the density issue here. Because if you start looking at the sign, if you look at the diagram that they're presenting, 134 acres. From a density standpoint, if they were using all 134 of those acres, and I think it's also very interesting that we keep talking Ville's Road, when Ville's Road will not be impacted by this other than during the construction. All of this traffic is going to come out onto Bradyville Pike. So again, I find it very interesting that we keep talking about Ville's Road. Ville's Road's not going to be affected by this to any great extent, at least not initially. So if there are other options that we could consider, widening the road, maybe even considering putting in a traffic light. And I know that there's probably been a traffic study that's already gone through. We've done those, in projects that I've been involved with. So I do understand. But I'm still saying that this is something that we need to make sure that we are comfortable with and we know it's not going to create a problem for those individuals. And now, I'll say this one more and I'll shut up. As you head down, going east on Bradyville Pike, where the entrance is going to be there at Pebblebrook, where the second entrance is located, it's right before a curve. And I can guarantee you that anybody that is here that lives in that area has heard the sirens as they've come down the Bradyville Pike, where cars have gone off the road at that particular location. There are still turn signs that are still laying on their sides that have not even been picked up from the last time there was an accident there. It happens so frequently that I assume they figure, well, we'll get around to it when we can. That is right at one of these four-way intersections that this particular project is creating. Someone coming around that curve will not have the opportunity to really and truly slow down before they see somebody getting ready to turn into this particular subdivision. So I would ask again, I appreciate the Commission's time, but I would ask again that you consider those concerns that I have as a resident in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jay Davidson, excuse me, 1909 Sterling Street. Very excellent job with the safety issues there, but also something that hasn't been brought up yet, but schools. If this is going to be zone city, are these potential with 210 homes, average 4 people per house, right? 800-something people, a lot of kids for the playground and everything. But what about the schools there? Currently, right there in the county, we're zoned for Whitworth Buchanan. They're already projecting overrun. A lot of kids there. They're talking about adding the trailers there for extra classrooms. Buchanan Elementary, already overrun. There's no high school that'll be zoned for Riverdale, and everybody here, if you're a member of Murfreesboro, knows Riverdale's already overrun, even with the building additions that has happened in the last several years. But as far as the safety thing goes, like I mentioned, the curve, whoever's in house 117, I believe it is on the diagram, they're going to need to put a NASCAR retaining wall to keep cars out of the bedrooms on there. But the plan 2034 to widen Bradyville Pike, it has been talked about 20-something years to widen Bradyville Pike. It has not happened yet. So, I mean, my question is that's been addressed, or are we just going to wait? They propose that this development would take 4 to 6 years. So we're going to have to wait 4 to 6 years and then wait another 12 years before anything even happens. So that is a big concern. And I hope y'all take in consideration that because at least, like I said, the density aspect, we know Murfreesboro's growing. People's got to have some place to live. It helps our local economy. We know it's going to happen. But does it have to be 210 homes, right? We're talking about property value, making it more effective, taking it down, making it an acre home. All right, the value that was brought forward was hopefully anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 a house. Make the area maybe bigger, maybe 150 homes. I don't know. I don't have the magic number, but at a potential of 4 cars per house, that's 800 and something cars just in that area. So hopefully that'll be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call before we close the public hearing. All right, public hearing is now closed. Matthew?
Thank you, Chairman Wade. I think that I can answer a few of the questions that Mr. Davidson had with regards to schools. As a part of our annexation plan of services, we do contact city schools. Black Fox, these, as far as city schools is just the elementary system that this property would be zoned for. City schools indicated to us that that this tract would be zoned for Black Fox Elementary, which is just a little bit to the northwest on South Rutherford Boulevard. Black Fox is just adding new classrooms there to accommodate the additional growth in the area, and Murfreesboro City Schools said that Black Fox would be able to handle any proposed development on this property, the students that would be generated. With respect to the density, our Murfreesboro 2035 comprehensive land use plan that was adopted by the Planning Commission does make a recommendation for the density on the property, and that's 2 units to 3.54 dwelling units per acre, and this development is at 1.57 dwelling units per acre. With regards to traffic, I think that I would like Mr. Taylor to come to the lectern and elaborate on the traffic study that he and his traffic engineer have prepared and summarize its findings.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Matt Taylor from SEC. Mr. Blomley is correct. We had engaged Fishbach Transportation Group, Ms. Gillian Fishbach, to perform a traffic study. She analyzed both of our proposed intersection points. One of those would be at Sterling Street, the other at Pebblebrook Drive. And she did traffic counts on December 5th and December 6th. That was a Tuesday and Wednesday of last year. And what she came back with was that currently both of those intersections operate at what you call level of service A or B at both the AM and the PM peak times. So essentially that means fairly free flow. You'll have minor delays on those at that intersection. From there, she went and she pulled TDOT's transportation history of vehicles over the last 16 years. From 2001 to now, the traffic on Bradyville Pike has actually decreased on an average daily trip basis. And since 2007, that number has held pretty steadily at about 3,700 average daily trips. So instead of just projecting out a growth based on those growth numbers, she conservatively assumed a 10% growth over the life expectancy of this project. In addition, she stacked the traffic generator from our project onto that and then reanalyzed both intersections. Both of those intersections would still operate at a level of service A or B. Level of service is graded, if you will, on a schedule from A to F, A being the best, which is no delays, F being gridlock, essentially. So pre and post development, those intersections will still operate at a level of service A or B, which is very well. Her traffic study did recommend a couple of things. One of those would be the addition of shoulders along our frontage on the north side of Bradyville Pike, and also recommended a left turn lane into our site and into the subdivision to the south at the intersection with Sterling. And we are in complete agreement with doing all of those recommendations.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
So give us an idea of, when you say this, or somebody give us an idea of where this left turn lane is going to start and end. Is it going to be at the west side of this development that would extend all the way to Sterling Street, or is it to the west side of this development all the way to Pebblebrook?
So what the recommendations in the traffic study said were that it would be on the west side of the development to Sterling Street, and then we would do the exact same turn lane at Sterling Street except for the westbound traffic going into the subdivision to the south. That is what the traffic study proposed and recommended that needed to be done. So not all the way across the property.
So the people that are turning left out of Pebblebrook, are they going to be, is there going to be a lane that they can get into to wait for traffic to
No, sir. It's
emerge?
Coming out of Pebblebrook, it will operate the same as it does today. There's not a onto the two lanes. Sterling was where the left turn lane improvements were recommended from the traffic study.
And Mr. Halliburton,
Yeah.
it was staff's recommendation to continue that, to have a continuous left turn lane for both of those proposed intersections.
So staff is saying to extend it to Pebblebrook. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's correct.
I would agree with that, because you take the curve into consideration and they're trying to turn left, at least it gives them an opportunity to get into the middle lane and then merge into traffic, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and we do have other members of our staff here who are more knowledgeable about traffic than I am.
I will say in that particular location, that option would only be available if there's not a car setting to turn left into our subdivision to the north. And so that's going to operate like a four-way intersection right there.
And I think from our standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, one car turning left could hold up traffic, and so we want to get, for both of those intersections, we want to get cars into a center turn lane so that they do not hold up traffic as they're trying to turn left.
All right, so everybody good with Mr. Taylor? Any questions?
Matt, you said that there were also recommendations for shoulders. Is that from end to end property?
That's along our entire project frontage, yes, ma'am. And in addition, we would be dedicating right-of-way to accommodate the city's future major thoroughfare plan, which I think is a 3-lane section through this portion. So I think we would be dedicating either 30 or 35 feet to achieve a future 60 or 70-foot wide right-of-way section through here.
Is that including the 30-foot buffer?
So our 30-foot buffer will be outside of that. In reality, we show about 50 feet.
Yeah.
We've set a minimum of 30 to accommodate for this future right-of-way.
Got it. That was one of my questions.
So the build out of this subdivision, are we expecting all these homes to be built at once, or how many are we talking about per year?
So a time frame, by the time we would be through with the City Council public hearing process would be in April or May, and then develop construction plans over the next, say, 4 months. So we would, the earliest we would see construction would probably be the fall of this year. That means the first section, which would probably be roughly 40 lots, would probably come online spring, early summer of 2019. From there, a good absorption, we anticipate between 30 to 40 a year, so we would anticipate 5 to 7 years starting in early 2019. Okay. So you're talking 2023, 2025. Now, if it's just a killer spot, then maybe we're done by early 2021 or 22. If it's a slow spot or we hit a slowdown in the overall economy, it could be much later than that.
Chairman Wade, I'm fortunate to have other members of staff here, specifically Mr. Huddleston, who ably remind me of important information that I forget to disseminate to you. Mr. Huddleston did remind me that the property has direct frontage on Bradyville Pike, which is on our major thoroughfare plan. All properties that are impacted by our major thoroughfare plan will be required to either construct certain upgrades as well, or pay fees in lieu of for its share of the improvements of the roadway. In addition, it's a substandard street, and any time that we have a substandard street, whether it's on the major thoroughfare plan or not, we require either upgrades be constructed with the development or fees in lieu of construction be paid, so that those fees can be used at a later date in a more comprehensive project. So, Mr. Huddleston is here if you have any additional questions on that particular topic.
Mr. Huddleston, I know you'd like to come to the podium.
Evening, Chairman Wade, members of the Planning Commission. I was content to text Matthew and let him pass it on, but I'd be glad to come and give you some additional attention. I think staff's in agreement that that the full length of this project needs to be looked at along Bradyville Pike for the traffic operations and substandard street and major transportation plan requirements that we've talked about. While I'm here, I'd like to maybe just also give you an update on Bradyville Pike from Northwest Broad Street. We're in the close to the right-of-way acquisition phase on that particular stretch. It's going to take us, we estimate, about a year to gather the right-of-way, and then we'll be in a position to start construction. That's about a 2-year construction project, and that stretch would go from Rutherford Boulevard back into town to Broad Street. And then also to remind the Planning Commission and our audience here, in the past 20 years, the city and our road building partners, we have constructed $350 million worth of roadway improvements. I think this number is probably accurate, but we're the #2 road builder in the state of Tennessee, most of the time behind the Department of Transportation. And so we've had a history of improving roadways, and we'll continue that. We're projecting right now in the very short term, again, about another $350 million of roadway improvements. And so we do look at our road patterns, road networks, and we do work aggressively to improve those with us and our improvement partners. And then just to maybe remind you of some numbers out of the 2040 transportation plan, we projected that to be about a $1 billion level of spending to implement all of those projects. And I only say those numbers just to remind you of this body and the mayor and council's commitment to major road projects in our city, and then the discussion that we had about the substandard street policy requiring developers along those streets to participate in the construction is a part of that as well. And I'd be glad to discuss or answer other questions you might have about that.
Any questions for Mr. Hudson?
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question here. So do you know the timeline on the improvement plan for Bradyville Pike? I know it isn't ours, but from a state standpoint.
Well, what I will say about that, we do not have a specific timeline. We've targeted the midterm improvements, and basically that's the middle part of our 2040 transportation plan. So, in the 10 to 18-year time frame, because it is part of our program now and we work very closely with TDOT, we'll start encouraging them to get it on their radar screen, and they're one of our development partners in constructing road projects here in Nashville. In Murfreesboro. And so we will get it on their radar screen. We've got it on our radar screen, and we will we'll make efforts to get this stretch looked at. The termination of this roadway is of the improvements is Joe B. Jackson Parkway, and so that will play a factor as well when Joe B. Jackson is extended eastward and improved to Bradyville Pike. That gives us a good Rutherford Boulevard to Joe B. Jackson to target for improvements. Likely that would be done in phases.
Thank you. Any other comments from the staff? Commission?
Matthew, the current acreage, and if this remained in the county, I'm assuming it's zoned RS-15? Or something
It's
comparable?
zoned RM in the county, which is their residential medium density, which is their standard single-family classification.
So at the number of acres, what would be the density level that this property would have by right?
It's difficult to say with the environmental constraints on the property. If this qualifies for a step system in the city, it may qualify for a step system in the county. The step systems are operated in the county by CUD, and I believe that the step systems in the county or in the city allow a little bit more flexibility with regards to lot sizes and setbacks. So I think that's the main reason why it's more attractive for developers if they have the option of a step system in the city versus a step system in the county, why a step system in the city is a more attractive option. Mr. Halliburton, it's difficult to say because what development option they may choose in the county, whether on a step system or on septic tanks. Certainly, if they chose a step system in the county, the allowable density would be much greater than if they developed on individual septic tanks. I'm sorry, that's not a very precise answer to your question.
If I can, I would address that, we're, I think our typical lot size here is 55 by 120, 125, something like that. We're doing identical lot sizes in the county on a step system as well. So we've got several subdivisions at that same lot size in the county. And I think Matthew mentioned a comprehensive plan references a 3.43 units to the acre, I think. And somebody brought up calculating density on just where our lots are. If you do that, we're still at like a 3.5 or a 3.6. So we are basically still within the comprehensive plan recommended density for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
One last question, Matt. So am I understanding that we're at a difference of opinion with respects to this left turn lane?
Well, I think the difference of opinion is I found out about the recommendation about 10 minutes ago, and so I've been trying to decide, and I think my clients are trying to get comfortable with a, $200,000 or $250,000 decision over the course of the last 10 minutes. So I think that's the difference. We'll be happy to continue to have the conversation with staff. They've got many more licks at us, I assure you, beyond tonight.
We got a traffic study late last week, and so we were able to come to some conclusions right before the meeting.
But we'll be happy to continue to have the conversation beyond tonight.
Anyone else? Any other comments?
The other item that you mentioned at the very beginning, before we even opened the public hearing, was that we needed to make note of the fact that we needed a traffic study at the intersection of Bradyville Road and Ville's Road. Is that something that you're asking for, a future traffic study based on that?
That was a request of Mr. Balachandra for the traffic impact study to take into consideration that intersection and what impact this development would have on that intersection. And that was something that Mr. Balachandra thought may merit some additional analysis. He may be able to elaborate in greater detail on that.
Just want to make sure we don't forget that if we're supposed to keep that top of mind.
He indicated that he would be comfortable continuing to work with Mr. Taylor and his traffic consultant as this progressed through the process.
We'll be happy to go back and get counts or whatever we need to do there to do the study. We just need to know exactly what Mr. Balachandra wants studied at that location, and we'll be happy to take care of that in the future.
Anyone else?
I'll just want to comment that I know there are the constraints of the SEP system and the requirements to support that. And the thing that just seems probably more too simply obvious to me would be that some kind of access to Ville's would alleviate a lot of this congestion that seems to be the point of contention and discussion around the continued turn lane and the added cost that comes with that. I'm sure you guys had those conversations about the constraints, but just thought I'd bring it up in case there was anything that needed to be shared with us.
It was something that when we initially met with the applicant about this, it was something that we discussed with them, and just because the northern third of this property approximately was going to remain undeveloped, and because of those physical constraints on the property, I think our transportation and engineering staffs felt comfortable with the stub to the undeveloped property to the west, with the expectation that when that develops, we would require the connection to Ville's Road at that time. And of course, we don't know when exactly that connection would be made, but our transportation and engineering departments did consider that and felt comfortable with the design.
Ms. Garland, to reiterate what Mr. Blomley said, I would describe the eastern portion and the northern portion of this property. If you get into those woods and that heavily wooded area, I'd describe it as looking at like the surface of the moon. It's very rocky, very crevassy. It does not drain extremely well, and that is the reason that we avoided those areas altogether. We have additional soils on this site that we're actually putting lots on, and so our overall lot count, we would have preferred to have gotten more lots here, but because of the terrain of the property, we're sacrificing suitable soil for the step system to stay out of those, because it'd be so difficult to go in there and actually construct a road and buildable lots on those.
Thank you.
All right, anyone?
And you didn't feel you needed the connection over to the eastern property in case it ever develops?
And I think that was a similar consideration regarding the existing conditions of the property.
Before we go vote, I'd make a comment. Now, I think it's really important that we understand that it's going to be 210 homes built, but they're not all going to be put in there at one time. That's going to make a huge difference. But also to the applicant, I think it's very important that if we start talking about the turning lane, I understand that you just now found out, but I understand that it's very important when we're talking about safety as well, to extend that down to Pebblebrook. So if there's no more questions, is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion, we approve. I think that by right, we would have similar density. The landowner would have, by right, a similar density. I'm going to echo Kurt's comments that I'm assuming we're going to see a site plan for this at some point, that I'll be strongly urging that the turn lane go all the way to Pebblebrook.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? Motion passes.
Chairman Wade, if we could get a clarification on the motion, is that to include the left turn lane, or is that?
It's to include.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand why you're asking the question, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item E has been removed. Next is item F, zoning application PSO amendment for Stones River Mall, PSO on approximately 48 acres, 21 acres, located along Old Fort Parkway, Stones River Mall Boulevard, SVAP 2, Stones River applicant, LLC applicant.
Chairman Wade and Planning Commission members, the Stones River Mall located at 1720 Old Fort Parkway consists of an enclosed mall, an open air shopping area called the Lifestyle area. It's on 35 acres. In 2007, they received planned signage overlay zoning, and since then, they have been bought by a different company about 4 years ago. They have recently received approval to build a multiplex theater that's currently under construction where the food court and Books A Million was. The changes they're planning to their planned signage overlay booklet consist of changing the rebranding of the center from Stones River Mall to Stones River Town Center, also changing the owner's name from the previous owner to the new owner's name, and signage for the new theater. I believe you all have a copy of the PSO booklet. The Building and Codes Department and Planning Department have reviewed the booklet and recommend approval. And John Speed with the Sterling Group is here to do a short presentation. And from there, I believe you hold a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Hope.
Thank you.
You state your name and address.
Yes, my name is John Speed. I'm with Sterling Organization and SVAP 2 Stones River, the ownership of Stones River Mall. Let me find my PowerPoint. That's shown on your screen?
Go ahead.
Is it? There we go. Okay. Right. So as Mr. Holtz mentioned, we're requesting a revision of the PSOD, namely to address the changes we are proposing or currently in the progress of making to the mall. The first of which is the rebranding, changing the name Stones River Mall to Stones River Town Center. That change would be reflected on the pylon sign, the mall entrance signs, and anywhere else throughout the mall that the current Stones River Mall signage is shown. The second change, which we are currently in the process of completing, is the addition of the 9-screen AMC movie theater. It's set to open on Memorial Day. Their signage was in compliance with the previous PSO. We just wanted to add it as part of this revision to make sure it was reflected on a current PSO. And finally, we, as Mr. Holtz mentioned, we haven't updated this in 10 years. And so we needed to just get everything up to date. We updated the site plan to reflect the new AMC building where the food court and Books A Million used to be. Changed the ownership name, logos, we updated the pictures of the existing conditions, and we removed all of the old signage that was shown as existing. And that is about the extent of what we're requesting to be revised.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from staff before we open our public hearing? All right, let's open up our public hearing. All right, let's close it. What is the wishes of this body?
So, Mr. Holtz, you didn't have any concerns or anything, anything you needed us to pay special attention to in here?
No, ma'am.
All good.
It's pretty simple. Just a few face changes on the pylon signs out front. And then you'll see the new signs going up on the theater here in the near future. So it's pretty clean change.
Make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Hope.
If there's no other questions or comments, I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Staff reports and other business.
Good evening, Chairman Wade. Do have one item under other business. Before the meeting, I handed out a one sheet addition to our business tonight. And the item is Robert Rose Village East, final plat for 10 lots on 32.9 acres. And that's zone MU and GDO 1 located along Medical Center Parkway and Robert Rose Drive. North Church LLC developer. This plat was approved by this body on June the 21st. The developer received approval of standard subdivision and now wishes to have the subdivision approved as an integrated subdivision and associated site developments. Basically what that means is that the sites that have been approved with that plat would be developed together. The real outcome of that is it gives us flexibility on bonding and recording the final plat at any point in the process. Traditional subdivision, we will only sign the final plat and receive bond after the infrastructure is constructed. The developer wishes to create the public infrastructure and also start construction on some of the sites simultaneously, and so this approval would grant him that ability. Staff recommends approval. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hodgson? Thank you, Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you.
Any comments? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Carried. All right, any other business?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to point out that I placed on your desk a letter from the Main Street Murfreesboro organization, and the letter expressing their support for the Sean and Christy Hackinson project to build their Riser Room, which is the name of the restaurant that we have titled the Alley on Main. You reviewed at your last meeting, and we mentioned that they hadn't gotten in contact with Main Street organization. I wanted to point out to you that the Main Street's reviewed it and approved the plans.
All right, thank you. We don't need a motion for that.
You'd need no motion. I just wanted to follow up with you.
All right, thank you. Before we adjourn, Mr. Robert Lewis. 18 years. Would you come to the podium, sir?
Thank you.
Speech. Just a little bit more than
y'all. I didn't have a speech, but I want to say that I have really enjoyed working with all the talented people here Murfreesboro has in all their bodies that they have doing their business. You all really do a good job, and I'm glad to have been a little part of it. So that being said, after the public hearing, I'll answer any questions.
Well, let me say this, that we're more than glad to have you on staff for the last 18 years?
17 plus.
17, 18, they're all together. Yeah. So we do appreciate what you've done and what you provided for our city, and we hope you have fun in retirement.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Robert, I'd like to just say a special thank you. You were the first guy that I met in the planning department, and your service to me was exemplary. So thank you.
Well, they're lucky to have you.
Okay, time to adjourn. All right, thank you. Anything else, staff?
Yes, Vice Chairman, we have just actually sent out this week our 4th mailer on our census. You know, it's not.
Say that again? We didn't hear you.
4th mailer on our
Oh, okay.
census. The state has been gracious enough to extend our time period to the end of March. The fire department is going door to door, and the time will change, I think, on the 11th, so that's going to give us a little bit extended hours. Hopefully we can reach our numbers. It's very important, so if you do get a card, that means that we haven't got one from you, so please fill it out, send it back in. It means a lot to us as far as that money for building roads and keeping our taxes down. So please send those cards back in. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? If not, meeting's adjourned.